Um, but yeah, I run products for Skytap, and don't go by my title. We build a product that is meant for testers. Hence, we have some insight on how testing works and what are the problems that we face as a testing community. So I'll try to talk about some of the things that we have encountered and some of the places where we have delivered value in our testing pipelines. So faster, higher, stronger. Anyone know where does this motto come from? It's a worldwide organization. Yes, so you're there. It's the motto of the Olympics. And hence the title for our talk, which is Achieving Olympian Heights for Agile Testing. And we're trying to use the cloud for that. Everybody loves the cloud these days, so how do we use the cloud? Can we move forward? All right. The agenda for the next 35 minutes or so is pretty straightforward. I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about agility and quality and how they interact, and where does cloud fit into the picture, and why does it fit into the picture. And then I'm going to introduce a simple framework that we have found very useful working with the testing community, especially in context of the cloud. We call it the 4 C's framework. This we find is very useful to assessing the kind of tools and the frameworks that you're trying to use and transform your testing pipelines and see which ones work, what works, what doesn't work, and what you get out of each set of tools. And lastly, we're going to spend a lot of time looking at some of the transformations that we have come across, and those I think will resonate with you as well as you work in your organizations. But we're going to go through a set of 4 transformations that I think will help you increase the productivity and the quality and the speed of your testing workflows. Keep in mind, my goal here is to give you certain kind of anchors and takeaways, the framework, and a certain set of transformations. Don't treat this as gospel coming from some mountain somewhere, but more as a template. Because a lot of you will work in different settings, different scenarios, and you'll have variations in how your pipelines work and the problems you face. But these should give you a certain starting point to start to transform your testing workflows. All right, it's going a little bit faster than I expected. All right, so to set the stage, the current stage of testing or software delivery, right? Nothing news to you. One of the keynote speakers, Abhinay, talked about this as a problem in his organization as well. You're being asked to move with higher quality at a faster speed and with lower cost. Right? And hence the tie-up with our Olympic motto, which is you want to move faster, you want to release faster, and you want to move with higher quality, and you want a strong set of controls on the cost while you're doing all of these things. And these constraints are pulling you in different directions, which often results in not enough testing happening, as Abhinay was talking about in the morning, right? You have a product, a feature that you have to release, you just have to release in 2 days, you just don't have time to test, right? So you release whatever is there, and sometimes, more often than not, there are bugs that you don't find, they end up in production, and those bugs, as we all know, can be really, really costly, right? So you'd obviously want to move fast because that's the business value that you're delivering to your organization, but you want to do your bit to maintain the high quality. That's what we're here for. And at the end of this, there's a whole envelope of, well, we got to do it with lower cost, right? You can throw money at everything and maybe solve a lot of problems, but you have a certain amount of dollars available to you. So that's the context that we are talking about in this talk, right? But when you talk about the cloud, right, the cloud cannot be the be-all, end-all of everything, as these 2 guys just found out, right? You cannot just use the cloud as a sledgehammer and say, I've solved every agility problem, right? You have to be cognizant about where the cloud fits in and what set of tools and capabilities it enables that allows you to move faster, higher, and stronger. No laughs for this? Nothing? This is the post-lunch session, right? All right, I'll live with that. All right, so the other piece of context here is the kind of applications that we talk about, right? I'm sure there are a plethora of architectures that you guys work with. There are lots of different styles of applications. But a simple framework to think about classes of applications are, one, the born in the cloud class, right? So these are kind of the Netflixes of the world. The Netflixes of the world, the classic web and mobile apps, the Netflixes, Facebooks, or even applications that you might have seen in your organizations that have transformed, that have gone from an older set of architecture, people have rewritten, re-architected things, and they're starting to use the cloud paradigms, right? So every cloud out there has its own set of models, has its own set of do's and don'ts and architectures that you have to conform to. And it's not that every application in the world can conform to it, but these set of applications do just because they were designed with the cloud in mind. But there's a huge class of applications which, for lack of a better term, I refer to as classic apps. Classic doesn't mean that, yeah, they're obsolete or anything. It's just classic is old as gold. Classic is great. And these are some of the most important and mission-critical applications running in the world today, right? But you can see, this is kind of an example of a real-world application that we have dealt with. It's a combination, a complex combination of a lot of different components here. You can have all sorts of databases, data warehouses, middleware components, web front ends, all sorts of things running around. And these components have been kind of built over time by a set of people. The architecture has evolved. So there's a lot of complexity here, right? And we're talking about sort of agility, moving faster, higher, stronger. In this context, right? How do you bring the cloud, where these applications were not designed for the cloud, how do you bring the cloud into the fold and start to transform these applications, right? And that's what I'll try to illustrate today. And maybe it's a start of a journey, but I'll give you some flavor of what we have seen. So why do we even talk about the cloud, right? Cloud has certain interesting properties that I'm sure all of you know about, right? So there's a whole aspect of it being very self-service. You don't have to depend on IT to give you resources. You can just go and get resources, right? You're not blocked on things, right? It's very on demand. You use it when you use it. You don't use it when you don't need it. You can get it whenever you want, 24/7, 365 days a year, right? There's a scale aspect to it, right? There's massive scale in the clouds that are available, right? And the scale is important just because of the types of testing that you're required to do and the kind of applications that are bursting over in the enterprise scenario. And there's, of course, the global reach, right? You have teams, globally distributed teams that are spread throughout the world doing testing on various components of a given application. How do you make that possible? Cloud is really great at that. But just these properties alone are not important. Well, they are important, but they are not useful in their own. What you need is some form of translation that takes you from these properties to faster, higher, and stronger, right? And that's where I'd like to introduce this 4 C's framework, and I'll define it shortly, which we think is a very useful framework to kind of take these properties and evaluate the set of properties that each set of tools or clouds is bringing in to transform your testing cycles. So let's talk about the 4 C's. So the first one, I'll frame these 4 C's not in terms of definitions, but in terms of the questions that should pop up in your mind when you're thinking about these transformations. So the big question in the first C, which is configurability, is around, well, can I have test environments that truly represent the complexity of my application stack in every stage of testing, right? So we're thinking about application stack. We're not just thinking about environments. We're not thinking about VMs and networks and storage. We're thinking about application, right? It's not just infrastructure, but the configuration of the application as well. And we're thinking about complexity, right, in every stage, which means that, well, if you're earlier in your testing cycle, you probably want something that is of lesser complexity, as opposed to as you go further, you need something more representative, more production-like, right? So you should be looking at tools that help you service this range of complexity, right, for the entire application stack. The next one is consistency. And the key question here is, can I depend on my test environment to be in the exact state that I want whenever I want it, right? And this is critical because as testers, as people who are responsible for quality of a product, your most productive time is spent actually testing, like finding new and creative ways to break the product, right? Not new and creative ways to stitch up the infrastructure and get VMs running and get networking running, right? That's a waste of time. You want something, a set of tools that helps you get into the exact state. You got a feature request on Friday, and you're supposed to deliver a delta on top of the last build. Well, you should be able to get to that last build really, really quickly, right? That's what I mean by consistency. Collaboration, again, going back to the size of teams that is expanding, especially in an enterprise context. You have big global teams, and you have various roles, development, you have QA guys, you have ops guys. How do I make sure that the cycle, the feedback cycle, which is so important for agility, right? You find bugs, the bugs are sent back, they get fixed quickly, you get them back, and you find the next set of things, right? That feedback cycle, how can we make it a lot more productive than it is today? And the last one is something that I guess your organizations will love more, appreciate more than you, but you should be cognizant about it, which is control, right? Which is, can I ensure that the right set of people have the right set of resources to do the job that they're supposed to do, right? And this is all about, well, I should have when you ask me to deliver a test pass on this build on Friday night, I should have the environments whenever I want, right? And how do I ensure how I, as an IT guy in a certain organization, in a certain setting, or a manager in a certain setting, ensure that my team has the right set of tools, the right set of resources available, right? They're not blocked. So this is one way of kind of defining these questions, but I'm sure there are many ways. But I hope this gives you an inkling of the kind of questions that you should be asking when you're thinking about transforming your testing workflows, right? So let's move ahead. So let's transition into actually how we use these 4 Cs, or what kind of transformations that we can achieve in our testing pipelines, right? So this is a classic representation of what a software delivery pipeline would be, right? Right? Yes? No? It's a very simplified, I'm sure it's a very simplified representation. There are 28 forms of testing that I just knew about today. There may be many more boxes, but this is a very simplistic representation, but I think it gets the point across, right? You go from left to right, you have a set of, you have code being produced, you run through a set of testing, and you get to production, right? That's a simple model. 3 key things to point out here, right? As you go from left to right, the complexity is increasing, right? Which means the complexity of things that you're trying to do, not only in terms of the testing you're trying to do, but the complexity of the application environments that you're trying to test increases as you go from left to right, right? The churn is most on the left and least on the right. And by churn, I mean what is changing, right? The amount of changes that you're dealing with, right? Obviously, on the leftmost side where you have individual developers and testers doing their own thing, constantly you have check-ins happening, and you have your changes happening, bugs being found, fixed, and the process is a vicious circle, right? Lots of churn on the left. And as you get to production, you really don't want any churn. Like, stability is the key. And lastly, people, right? As you go from left to right, the number of people who are touching or involved with this complexity and churn is the highest on the left and lowest on the right, right? IT guys don't want anybody touching production, whereas in dev test, everybody has their own thing, everybody is doing their own thing, right? Lots of people, lots of roles involved. So it is in this context that I want to take you through a set of transformations that will illustrate the kind of changes that you can do to achieve this faster, higher, stronger that I'm talking about. And I should preface anything that I say by saying, well, this is not the only way to go, and this is not the only sequence in which you can do it. But this is something that we have seen a lot of our customers take up and have these transformations and be successful with it. And as we go along, I'll illustrate the problems that exist in each transformation, and we'll talk about a set of tools that exist in the ecosystem, and we'll briefly look at 4 Cs, how we can use the 4 Cs to evaluate this transformation. And I'll point out some results that we have seen. So the first one, I call this on-demand test environments. And the place where this is most applicable is the first stage of the pipeline where you have individual developers and testers, right? And the problem here is everybody has their own thing. Each developer is working with their own stack. Each tester is working with their own stack. Maybe you have one shared environment that everybody is trying to access, which is the place where you go and test when certain build happens. But there is no reliability on the quality of testing that is happening at this point, right? So as a result, a lot of bugs escape this part of testing and get into the next stages, right? So how do we deal with this? So the set of tools that you usually would be, I'm sure you're all aware of these tools that I'm going to point out, but I'm going to try to build up a tool ecosystem here, and I'm going to give you, you'll see some examples here, which may kind of be familiar with you. But the point here is to give you some idea of the kind of areas that you need to consider for this transformation, right? So in this case, we're talking about, well, at the bottommost layer, we're talking about cloud platforms, right? You obviously need, what you need is to give these testers and developers consistent environments, right? So that the quality of testing that is happening is reliable. So you have a set of cloud platforms. Obviously, if you remember the configurability aspect of the 4 Cs, we were talking about application stacks, right? We're not talking about infrastructure, just infrastructure. We're talking about the entire application configured, right? So obviously, you have configuration management and deployment tools that are aplenty in this ecosystem. And of course, we talked about collaboration, right? So tight loops, feedback, going from developers to testers, testers to developers, and sort of shortening that life cycle. So you have these task management tools which help you achieve that. And of course, unit testing tools. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, and there's no reason why unit testing shouldn't be happening at this stage, right? So the 4 Cs, the kind of questions that you're asking here are, of course, can you give all of these developers and testers consistent environments, right? Can you give it to them in exactly the state that they need, the application configured every time, right? Now, every tester or developer might have a different baseline, but if you have that baseline, can you give it to them as fast as possible, right? And we talked about collaboration and, of course, control, which is, well, you have a team of 100 testers and developers, right? We're talking about giving everyone an application stack, right? How do we control the costs, right? And the kind of questions you should ask is, well, are these environments supposed to be running all the time, right? Can we just run them whenever they are needed and not run them when they are not needed, right? When you bring them back up, are they in the exact state that I left it? I did finish my testing at night, and there's no reason for these things to be running overnight. So you store them away, and next morning you come back and you start from where you left. You do not lose any state, right? So there is some aspect of cost controls here when you're trying to sort of deliver these on-demand test environments to every member, pretty much every member of your development and test team. So, and I just point out, as I go along, I'll give you certain metrics here. I don't want to spend too much time on what one of our customers has achieved, but you'll see, I think you'll all have copies so you can refer back to it. But I just I put together proof points just to illustrate what is possible, right? Oh, okay. So the other direction. The next transformation called continuous integration. Well, the industry calls it continuous integration. How many people familiar with continuous integration, delivery? Awesome. Yeah, so not news to you, but implementing it can be a little bit chaotic, a little bit complex, especially if you're talking about really the applications that I just illustrated, the classic apps, right? So what we're talking about, the problem we're talking about here is this continuous cycle of testing. For every check-in, the nirvana is for every check-in, there's a battery of tests that is running, and you're immediately getting feedback, what passed, what failed, and you're immediately taking action on it, right? If you read Jez Humble's, anybody read Jez Humble's book on continuous delivery? Okay, I'll highly recommend it. He talks about continuous delivery as a paradigm for Agile testing. It's a very, very good, well-written book, nice takeaways. But one of the key things for continuous delivery is feedback, right? You got to act quickly if you have to move quickly, right? If breaks happen, you have to move quickly. But what happens usually in classic enterprise scenarios are you'll have one integration environment maybe, and you have a bunch of components coming together in this integration environment trying to do testing, right? So they are blocked one after the other, right? So one person doing integration, causing a break, can delay the whole chain, right? And there's no control on, well, who's doing what in this environment, right? You could have the database guys doing some testing in here, where the web guy is also doing, and everything breaks and nobody knows what happened, right? So we're talking about a system wherein you're doing continuous integration for every component of that application, right? Thinking about how we break that application apart, that complex spaghetti application, thinking about how we break those components and enabling each component to run through integration testing cycles, right? Continuous integration. And again, the class of tools available here, I classify them into continuous integration and continuous quality tools. So continuous integration, there are a bunch of tools out there. I won't name names. You can see them. You can refer back to them. Continuous quality is, this is the set of tools that you should already have. It's a cardinal sin not to have this as part of your continuous integration cycle. This is just quality for free, right? These are in the class of static analysis tools that you should just have, right? It doesn't take much to set them up, and you get free testing. And as we're talking about the 4 Cs, again, when we're talking about these integration environments, these can range in complexity, right? Again, back to the configurability aspect. People could have one box testing if it so suits their need. One box means, well, you deploy all your components onto one box and you run all your testing on that particular box. But wouldn't it be better if you were running these continuous integration tests on a more representative environment, right? So which represents sort of the complexity of that your application is going through. So hooking in complex environments into your continuous integration cycle is an important aspect, a question you should ask. Can I do that, right? Consistency, right? Again, we're talking about continuous integration, which means you have to be running these tests quickly, of the order of minutes. So you really can't spend time, an hour, waiting for the infrastructure to come up and the application to be configured. You want a push button deployment or an API call to say, here's my application, right, in the state that I want, and I deploy my latest build, my delta on top of it, run my test, get my results, right? You want that speed. Collaboration, again, I emphasize feedback a lot. It is the most critical part of moving faster, especially in continuous integration, right? You want test results, you want them fast, and you want them disseminated in the team as fast as possible, and actually commit. This is kind of the unsaid truth that you need commitment from the team to actually act on those results. If they don't, then everything fails. And control, right? We're talking about these environments, right? In whatever way, shape, or form, in a consistent state, right? How do you manage these things? These are tests running all the time, right? You want to make sure that the utilization of resources when you're running through continuous integration test passes is absolutely spot on, right? But you do want that flexibility. And again, there's a proof point here. One of our customers has done exactly that and achieved great results. Sorry, I'm going pretty quickly because I think I'll run short on time. So my apologies. I want to leave some time for Q&A at the end. So the third transformation. This is I think it was touched upon in the morning as well. Production-like testing, right? That seems to be like a goal that everybody is trying to shoot for, but not everybody is successful, right? And the key thing here is, well, how can I ensure that I catch those nasty production bugs as early in the cycle as possible, right? And again, it boils down to, well, can you have an environment, can you have the set of tools that you can use to configure your test environments to the complexity which matches your production complexity? And this can be immense. Like, we're talking about complexity in the size and the scale of VMs that you're deploying, or the size, the complexity of the network topology that you have, to the complexity of the application deployment that you're talking about. So all of that thrown together in the mix is immense amount of complexity, right? And we're talking about bringing production, this complexity, earlier in the cycle, right? And one of the key things in here is data, which is kind of important, right? So how do I ensure that I have the right representative set of data as well, right, in my pre-production or my production-like testing environments. So all of the tools that we've just talked about are important to get to that complexity of production-like environments. The reason why I'm highlighting test data management here is that comes. Did I press something? That becomes a very important question to ask yourself. I'm getting a production-like environment. I've built up my application. Now, where's the data, right? The representative data. The nasty bugs are found where you're actually running against production-like data, right? So there's a whole set of tools that are available to you in the ecosystem around test data management, which, in conjunction with all of these tools, you use and you start to realize how you can kind of get these production-like environments back into the pipeline, right? And I highlighted pre-production as kind of the place where you bring in, but I would encourage you not to just stop your thinking at that. There's no reason why these can't be brought in even earlier in the pipeline. And lastly, parallel testing. So we talked about all of these three transformations. They help you go faster with higher quality, but what would make you go even faster? And the scenarios here are, well, your teams are growing, your product is growing, your business is growing, right? You're delivering more and more things. There are more people involved. There are more applications, more application components. If your pipeline is sequential, if you put more things in it, obviously it'll take more time, right? So you got to start thinking about bringing in parallelism in your pipelines, right? Which means parallelism at every stage, right? And that's what I tried to depict here. Now, this can be a very complex thing, let me tell you that, right? But if you achieve that, it can be a gold mine, right? And the key questions, again, here are, well, configurability. How do I get these parallel environments, right? I got one, right? I use a set of tools, I got one, right? I spent a lot of time, I got one. How do I get 10 of these, right? How do I get 10 pre-production environments? How do I get 100 continuous integration environments? All in the consistent state that I needed them to be, right? All defined as I need them to be, when I need them to be, right? And how do I, well, again, the Uber question, which I'm sure all of you probably don't care about, but I'm sure your IT organization will care about is, well, you're talking about so many different environments, right? I'm not going to give all of these to you because you'll blow your budget, buddy. So how does your IT control all of this? When you say, well, I want to bring in parallelism, what are the tools available? You need to think about, well, how do I make sure that I justify the utilization of these environments, right? How do I make sure that these environments are running when they need to and they're not running when they don't need to, right? Because you end up paying for those. But you do want that scale, right? You do want that scale. And that's where you start to sort of think about the cloud also in a sense. So again, another example, which I encourage you to kind of refer back. A customer of ours has done exactly that. How am I doing on time? Do I have time? 5 more minutes? Okay. So to wrap up those set of transformations, I mean, if there is any slide that you refer back to in my talk, and I'll be very honored if you refer back to the talk, this is the slide. So this is where I try to kind of summarize at a glance what we talked about. We talk about the transformation, the initial stage that you started off with, and you went through a set of transformations, and you ended up with this glorious, idealistic, beautiful pipeline that helps you go faster, higher, and stronger. And the 4 C's framework, right? So keep it at the back of your mind, right? Those are good questions to ask as you're going through these transformations and looking at this tool ecosystem that exists. What tools can I stitch together to get the results, the faster, higher, stronger quality that I want in my pipeline, right? So at this point, I'd like to transition into Skytap. I want to talk a little bit about Skytap and where we fit into this ecosystem. So Skytap we are an environments as a service cloud-based offering. We are designed for dev test workflows. We keep, our design points are you guys, right? How do we remove the inefficiencies that exist in dev test workflows? And I want to highlight a few things to illustrate the kind of thinking that we have when we go about delivering our product, and encourage you to kind of take a look at it. We have a booth outside as well. But the three things that I want to tell you about Skytap, the three key design points that we design around, and it'll start to echo the kind of things that I just talked about, the 4Cs framework. Complex workflows, right? We talked about complexity a lot. We design Skytap for serving complex workflows, right? Right from the fact that you need production-like environments, right? There is complexity in VMs and networking, and you name it, and you need that support in as easy and as self-service and as on-demand fashion as you can, and we deliver that to our customers. We have a rich set of APIs, so complex workflows also means, we talked about automation a lot. The unsaid theme was automation. We talked about automation, and automation requires that, well, you have something automatable. So our platform is designed for automation, and we plug in, we have a rich set of APIs that I'm sure at some point you'll look at. It's a REST API, so language agnostic. You want to write your workflows in C#, Java, Python, Ruby, you name it, and you can achieve that. And we have a lot of integration with industry standard tools that exist in the ecosystem as well. So you saw a lot of continuous integration tools and configuration management tools. We have built-in integrations with those tools that exist in the ecosystem. We build it for collaboration. And a great example of collaboration that I like to give is this whole bug repro cycle, right? So you as a tester find a bug, right? You've spent a lot of time configuring your application, getting to the point where you ran your test and found the bug. What happens next? You write up a ticket, and you write the repro steps and send it back to your developer. The developer has to do exactly the same thing. He has to leave everything that he's doing, set up the environment that you said the test would repro in, and maybe he has it right, and run the repro steps. And if lucky, he'll find the bug, right? And more often than not, you end up in a no repro scenario, and the bug is lost and ends up in production costing millions of dollars. So we'll build Skytap capabilities to service exactly these kinds of scenarios, right? You can essentially take a repro and save it off and ship it to your developer as a simple link. And the developer can essentially click on that link and get a consistent environment in exactly the same repro state that you encountered, right? It is your environment, but his copy, right? And they can debug to their heart's pleasure without blocking you at all. You can continue testing. And if they screw up anything, they can recreate another one, right? It's a great example of tightening those feedback loops. Don't spend time on things that are not required. Global teams, we're built for global teams, right? You want consistent environments being used by 3 of your teams throughout the world, and you have the environment that you want everybody to use. And well, ideally, you would want it to be closest to where they are. So we have capabilities where you can essentially click of a button, take that entire complex environment and shift it to Singapore, from US to Singapore. So your test team in India can access it really easily. So exact same environments, right? Consistency. And I won't talk a lot about this, but we are built for control. We talked a lot about this unsaid theme of control, but we are built for control. We help IT manage this on-demand self-service platform really, really well. So utilization is key, right? We have proactive and reactive tools that help IT manage these costs while helping you go through these transformations really, really productively. And this is my last slide. This is kind of a schematic of what Skytap is all about. We are an environments as a service platform. It's a cloud-based offering, and we utilize a bunch of infrastructures under the covers. Infrastructure is gas in the tank, but what is more important is complex workflows, doing these transitions, doing these 4 transitions, helping you do those 4 transitions. And that's about it. Do we have time for Q&A? Or no? Done? That's okay. So I can take 1 or 2 questions, and I'll be happy to hang around outside at our booth and encourage you to come there and have a conversation. Questions?
Yeah, so these environments will be exactly working the way the Amazon AWS works. So we will be costed if our servers are up running, else,
Correct, correct. So that's the control aspect of it, right? So when you're running, say, a continuous integration test pass, you run it for a few minutes, and you throw it away, right? It's a use and throw model, right? But the key to remember is this is an environment. This is an entire application stack, not VMs and networks, right? You bring it up, do your testing, throw it away. And we're really good, and even through a sort of manual testing passes, we're really good at proactively saving you money, right? We'll go ahead, and if we see, well, you're not running your test pass because you've gone for the day, right? We'll bring it down, right? You can come back tomorrow, and you'll be in exactly the same state. One more. Oh, the book on continuous delivery is Jez Humble. Yeah. So let's wrap up. Yeah, sorry I ran a little long, but I'm happy to stand outside in the Skytap booth, and I'll be happy to answer as many questions as you want. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.